Welcome to the inaugural edition of the Real Wisdom Podcast, where every week we take a deep dive into the trenches of the film and television industries. I'm your host, Derek Diamond, and I've been teasing this for a while, and I'm honored for the first guest under the new banner of the podcast. You might recognize him from Pretty Woman, the infamous Roger Corman Fantastic Four film, and I had the pleasure of working with him on a short film called The Walker that will be premiering later this year. Mr. Alex Hyde-White. Alex, how are you?
Derek, diamond in the rough.
That's
Good luck on your new show, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it and appreciate, you taking the time. And it's funny because after we worked on The Walker last year, I already knew then that I was eventually going to rebrand my show, and I'm like, I have to get Alex as my first guest.
Well, I'm living in Pensacola now, so...
Yeah, absolutely. So you lived in California for a long, long time. So what brought you to moving from LA to Pensacola?
Yeah, my wife has family here, and we visited a couple of times, and my son just graduated from Auburn, so he was, up in the southeast for about 4 years, and I like it down here. I did 40 years in Hollywood-based, started in 1978 as a contract player. And so I did my 40 years. And if I'd been anything else 40 years, I would have been, a grumpy one-star general or mid-level CEO or whatever. But 40 years in showbiz, you start to think, wait a minute, am I ever going to be living anywhere else? And then everything's moved remote, and we had storage facilities, and just the idea of leaving town. Hollywood is, it's a five-dimensional elastic band. You never leave Hollywood. Hollywood never leaves you. You know what I mean? But moving away and sort of coming to this area a little more in the country, a lot of the difficulties of living in major cities are free, and so I feel like I have more time. It feels like I'm living twice a life while expending half the energy, if you know what I mean. Basically, because I'm not on the freeway.
Right. Yeah. Because I've been to Los Angeles a few times, and the stories I've heard are all true about the traffic. And it's everything is just go nonstop. It's
a metropolis. It's a city state, and the movie and television industry, aside from the sort of nature-induced consolidations of the last few years with the pandemic and then the actors' strike and all that nonsense. It's also a global industry, not in the sense not just that everything we make is exported around the world, but a lot of these things are made elsewhere. So I've always felt that if you have to live in LA or you have to live in Hollywood for a career, whether it's in the business or in support, then fine. But if you don't, stay there for a while. So I think I was happy to, not that I've achieved a level of success and have now graduated, but it was like it was a personal satisfaction to be able to say, you know what, I don't need to be here. I'm not dependent on the ups and downs of the business as much as I felt I was when I was younger. So Pensacola is a nice spot for us.
So it wasn't like a culture shock from LA to Pensacola because you were ready to make that step to move away from LA?
Yeah, well, we'd been around a bit, and we'd spent some time in Auburn, and it's easy to like this the South. I'd done a couple of movies in Virginia, Civil War films. Now Virginia's neither the South nor the North, but I had an affinity for it. I spent some time, went to the film, took a movie to the Savannah Film Festival a while, and when I was younger, my dad was touring some shows. I spent some time in Florida, down in Palm Beach, which, might as well be Monaco or Beverly Hills. But I don't know. I felt that I've always enjoyed living in places. I felt, I was English born but American raised, so I felt I was a sophisticated desert rat,
Right.
Kind of can handle everything. And I since I've been here 2 years, I see, a bit of a culture shock, but L.A. is a very homogenous society. It's pockets. It's like very small fiefdoms within this large metropolis, and it lends itself well to after the fall kind of apocalypse film, because it's already segregated.
Right.
You would just have to add like walls and empty spaces, and then picket lines,
maybe
skirmish
throw in a
lines.
few zombies.
Yeah. Well, no, that's not hard. They're there. Cheers. This is to your
cheers.
new show.
Yeah,
We're doing
thank
this
you so much.
Joe Rogan style.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned you were born in London. Your dad was an actor.
Yes.
So did you feel from an early age that was your calling? That was what you wanted to do?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like I heard it calling, but I grew up very quickly. By the time I was 16, I graduated high school and I got into Georgetown University, which speaks to my sort of precocious nature, but it also speaks to the fact that in the mid-'70s, not many people traveled from California to Georgetown, and I was smart enough. My dad had done a play at the Kennedy Center, which had only just sort of launched. It was just right after Watergate. I think we stayed in the Watergate Hotel. And I found myself at Georgetown, which is great, except for the fact that I was 16 years old, and I wasn't socially mature enough to handle it. So within no time at all, I just refer to that time as, I think it's in my book, it's such a great school. I learned everything I needed to learn in 1 year, And so I think at that point, it's just a matter of circumstance. And I was drawn, because I was back in Southern California, I was drawn to it. I had an agent's phone number and I just got started. It's literally just throw your hat in the ring and hope someone picks it up, which was the old headshots. And I started to get some meetings. And it's not like I always wanted to be an actor, because I think a lot of times when you sort of grow up in the family business, you kind of look for something else to do, and then it depends on how hard you have to work, or else you go and you run the family's pharmacy or car dealership or whatever it is. And I was drawn to the solitude of film sets, and I would visit TV shows when I was younger, and I liked the sort of dichotomy of almost like controlled chaos and then quiet on the set, and quiet on the set is when the actors get to work. And I thought there was something inherently creatively empowering about that. And so I got lucky and started young, and I learned what that means, how to use that powerful moment, powerful opportunity, both in performance, but just as importantly, how you respect that moment, because everybody else is waiting for you to stop so they can do the next thing,
Right.
And it's a great, considering I didn't really spend enough time in school to sort of learn how to succeed slowly getting along, and you go for a degree and then a master's, whatever. I was very impatient, but I found a way to channel what ended up being natural in me, this sort of to live in and to enjoy and to share moments and make them powerful, which to me is what film acting, TV acting is.
Oh, 100%. And I think you summed up what it's like on a film set in the two words you said, controlled chaos, because it very much can be, but there's something like, you are meant to be in film and TV when you feel like you're at home on a set, and I love, being at my house. I love, going out with friends, but there's something peaceful about being on a set, because I've used this used this analogy numerous times. It's so amazing to see different people come together. They might have different ethnicities, different beliefs, but everyone comes together to make a film or a TV show happen.
Yeah, I mean, they either do or they don't.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
If they don't belong there, they start fighting, or they find a way to isolate themselves, and then they don't show up.
Yeah.
And I've never thought of. I grew up in the theater. All right, now the theater is notoriously a refuge for. It's like the circus, It's I'm only comfortable in the circus, And even if I'm holding a shovel, it's a refuge for sort of oddballs.
Right.
And I've always grown up in it. And the film and TV is a little more of a business. But to me, and I started, 45 years ago or something, I never thought of it as a place where people of all types and shapes and sizes come together. It was inherent. It was like the space was populated with people of all types. So therefore, one never thought of, okay, you are this kind of person. You are this kind of person. You look good in women's clothing or whatever. I mean, it's Shakespeare made some of his most memorable characters cross-dressers, which was code in the time for people of a peculiar disposition. Peculiar meaning sort of out of the ordinary. So, and I found in a way that Western culture, specifically American culture, in the last 20, 30 years, we think we've invented this stuff. We think we've invented cultural sensitivity, and we rail against it when we don't see it happening. But you grew up in the theater, or you grew up sort of almost anywhere in the old world, and if you didn't accept people, or you didn't cohabit among people of all shapes and sizes, they'd come and kick your butt. I mean, So it's very fortunate to have lived and survived in an arena where equality and sense of like I'm saying with the crew. The most important person on a film crew is the dolly grip. The guy who's pushing the camera. Because if the airplane that's coming comes off the wire, or the train something happens, it's that dolly grip who's going to be the last, because the cameraman's in his thing and the actor's in his own world and everybody else is looking at this small thing that's happening, and the dolly grip's saying, oh my God, we're going to crash, and he pushes you out of the way. So you got to get along with people, So it's a wonderful universe because anything can happen. And invariably, it is the strength of your relationship with your coworkers that is going to determine whether, how long you work in this business, I think.
Absolutely. Now, my grip friends will love to hear that comment that you just made.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. Do you even use dolly grips much? I mean, I know on your film, which was very well produced, I must say, that I was privileged to be the lead role in, which I hope gets its deserved reception out in the festival world. It was a lovely film to be a part of, starting with a really nice beginning, middle, and end script, and I was able to sort of collaborate with the director to add what I felt were some flourishes. That your crew was as good as any. I mean, again, I say, well, you have to be in. No, you don't. I can move to Pensacola, and a year after I'm being here, very talented filmmakers will say, hey, Alex, I've got this script for you, and I'm on page 1 and I'm on page 20. I go, this is a pretty good part, and I'm in Pensacola. That short film would not have come out in Southern California unless it's some college thing. I mean, it was really a pleasant surprise, pleasant bonus. I mean, and it was good work, and as a result, I felt that the work was good. I thought the lighting, the cinematography, all the nuts and bolts of it were good. And I guess we did lay some tracks, so there must have been a dolly grip.
Yeah, no, Steve Wise, who wrote the script and directed the film, he did a really great job with it. And he's really been my mentor, one of my mentors for the last, 11 years or so, I think, was when I met him.
Good. He's a nice guy. He's a good writer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a very good writer. We just happened to meet at a filmmaker meetup back in 2014, and we've just stayed in touch ever since.
Good. How many films have you done together?
We've done 4.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. So
his scripts or collaborations?
2 of them were his scripts, and 2 of them were mine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Derek, what was the first film you worked on? Mine was Battlestar Galactica. No, it was Quincy.
Quincy.
Yeah, what was the first film you worked on?
So the first film I ever worked on was actually Steve's film Survey, which we filmed back in 2017.
The award-winning Survey.
Yep, the award-winning Survey.
Yes.
Yep, I was one of the boom operators.
Nice. Oh, yeah, I think I saw you. You were in a couple of the shots.
Yeah, I had... It was. I can still feel the heat from that day because we filmed it in the middle of summer.
Yeah, I know.
In Florida.
Yeah.
I had long hair at the time.
Yeah.
So my head was like a mop when that happened. But no, that really kind of reinvigorated my passion.
That was like 4 years ago or so?
That was in 2017. Yeah. So like 6 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
Time flies.
We had the same actress in our film.
Yep, Anna Faulkner.
Anna, yeah, good.
Yep,
And
Anna
her
Faulkner.
husband, they were the stunt director, the fight
Yeah,
director.
Desso Faulkner, yeah.
Nice folks. Lovely crew. Yeah.
And that's what's so great about this community. And I talk about it all the time is that, I know LA is known for filmmaking and you've got some filmmakers in New York. And what's great about technology now is you can really make movies anywhere. And when you have the resources like you have here, you have all the tools to succeed. It's just putting forth the effort to make it happen.
I produced a 40-year acting career. I produced 2 movies, and in a 12-year audiobook producing career, I produced about 500 audiobooks. I'm going to stick with audiobooks. But the first movie was one of the last independent under $2 million films shot on 35 mil. It was 1999. It was released in 2000. I think it was an independent film called Pursuit of Happiness, and Will Smith's movie hadn't come out yet with The Pursuit of Happiness. So we were the Pursuit. Oh, you made that film? Yeah, no, the other one with Frank Whaley and Annabeth Gish and Gene Stapleton, a director with whom I'd worked and became friends with, named John Putch, was one of these really sort of homegrown filmmakers. Been doing it ever since he was a kid.
Right.
The daughter of theatrical parents. And this was a 35 millimeter. He took me to see the negative cutter, and we almost got into Sundance, but that was before it was before 9/11, and then before the sort of recession and contraction. Sundance was still, and deservedly so, they set such a high bar for a lot of disparate reasons, not least of which that they were kind of a bit full of themselves, maybe say no, and it was a lovely film. And his film, Putch's film, had gotten in like 2 years before a film called Valerie Flake, which was a nice offbeat film. It was a real Sundance film, so I thought we were going to get in because my goal has always been to be part of Sundance, and we didn't. But I still have those 5 reels in 2 plastic cans, and it's like the only living print of a lovely little film named Pursuit of Happiness, and we haven't even had it digitized, so it's available on. It's not. And that was what film was. It was molding real clay. Mm-hmm. And then a few years later, with the advent of the video cameras, which started like this, the old Panasonics, which are still great, it basically took a lot of the requirements out, which is good and bad because a lot of people. Well, I mean, yes, everybody. You can get grandma to buy you a 35 millimeter camera with a video for Christmas, and then you can be the next Spielberg, which means there's a lot of stuff out there, harder than ever. But the discipline that one learned in the days of analog filmmaking served us well. For instance, on The Walker, it's easy it's easy to get indulgent when you're creating film. I don't know about sort of music or art because I think that takes real talent. Film, you just have to get lucky and capture something that works. Mm-hmm. But the ability to compartmentalize, know when you're running on a short end of film, which you go, okay, we have about 50 feet left. Let's get this right. So you get it, and then the director says, no, that's all I need, and then he's moving on. There is a compartmentalization to film, which as an audience member when you see it. Mm-hmm. This wonderful film that Oz Perkins made called Longlegs is out now, and mm-hmm. my son and I went to see it. Now Oz. We worked together on Nope. He played the director in the opening sequence, and I was the producer.
Great movie, by the way.
It was a good film.
Nope, yeah.
And Jordan's a wonderful guy.
Yeah, he is. He's a great director.
He has that old school sensibility. He grew up on Twilight Zones and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, and they were filming in, I think it was 60 or 70 mil. It was huge cans at Hoyt van Hoytema. Who's made. I said to him day one. I said, "You shot Tenet?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Fuck." He goes, "What?" I go, "Fuck." He goes, yeah. I said, that movie plays pretty much the same way backwards. He goes, yeah, it probably does. They would change reels every 5 or 6 minutes. And so I guess what I'm saying is somebody has to teach you discipline if you're a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. And the best way to learn that is to have a micro budget. look at the films through the last 20, 30 years, basically been discovered at Sundance. Films like The Brothers McMullen and Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and the little primer, I think it was, supposedly is a $25,000 budget. I mean, and these things run 90 minutes, so you got to be disciplined as an artist, I think, as a visual, as a film or television artist. You need to be disciplined to know when to get out. What do they say? They say cut out of the moment as soon as possible and enter the next one as late as possible. We went through that a little bit when we were looking at the first cut of Walker. As much as I like watching me walk with one bad leg across the hallway to the door, maybe we could go from here to here and cut out 11, 12 seconds.
Yeah.
And you don't know it, you don't miss it. And
that's what's great about the filmmaking process, and as actually my favorite part is the collaboration, because you get all these different people that work so well together, and that's, to me, a film really comes together in post-production, because that's when you're piecing it together and you really start to see the sculpt kind of take shape, if you will.
If you film enough.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Coverage is important. We didn't do a lot of coverage. That was the only thing I was thinking, okay, Steve, are we good with this? Or, you want... And then I think there was a beat or two in the movie that we all felt, ooh, gosh, do we need to go back and reshoot? And no, you found another take. And very little physical difference, but it made a world of difference in the flow of the scene, I felt,
Well, what's great about short films and independent film is that you have to get creative in a way, and taking little bits from a different take that will actually make the whole story work.
Yeah,
and that's...
And the good thing is all you need to do is drop and drag on the computer instead of actually, no, I want to cut it here, and here's the film.
I can't imagine editing
awesome.
in those days.
I would get carpal tunnel syndrome.
Yeah.
They were these elderly females, I don't know, old gals. I mean, terrific.
Yeah.
What do you want? Okay, here. It was great.
If the DeLorean time machine really existed, I would love to see a film made in like the 40s and 50s.
There's a funny story. I don't know if it's true with John Wayne and John Ford. I think when John Ford was creating this myth of John Wayne in the movies, and Wayne had done a couple of films, so I think he felt that he was on safe ground. And at the end of a take out there, he says, "Okay," well, Ford goes, "Cut," and Wayne goes, "Mr. Ford, I think that was a good take. I feel really good on it." Ford goes, "Oh, yeah, you like that, do you?" He goes, "Yeah." He says, "Come here. You like that take?" He said, the cameraman, he says, open the box. He opens the camera, which just, as you know, just destroys the light, just hits it. He pulls it out. Then he pulls the film out. He says, "You like that? Here, you can have it." So there you go. Oh. It's a director's medium.
Yeah, there we go.
Don't for 1 minute think that you're controlling the process, because they get the edit.
That's a certain way of sending your message.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So to backtrack a little bit, you mentioned your time in theater. How did that help? How did that help your acting craft?
Well, it's funny. I was a product of sort of 70s TV shows like Starsky and Hutch and Happy Days, and it all looked so glamorous and easy that the one thing that I think I missed, and it's perhaps because I grew up the son of a successful actor who was a sort of anti-establishment person as well. Parents didn't encourage me to go to drama school. No, the RADAs or the Juilliards. Not that I could have gotten in. I probably could have gotten into RADA. So I spent the first 10, 15 years of my career kind of mourning the loss that I'm not a trained actor, but I was getting work. And, sometimes that works in your favor because you got something going on, even if it's you're deathly afraid of getting caught for being a fraud. I mean, Dustin Hoffman used to say that. But it's a very interesting question because I soon realized, and now that I'm older and they still haven't tapped me on the shoulder and said, okay, time's up, it's over. I've had a 40-year career. That I guess I learned how to be responsible for your moments. Which in theater, there's no stopping. You make a mistake or the door closes or the set falls down, You make sure nobody's hurt and you move on,
No safety net.
Yeah. And that's very much the way we made our Hamlet documentary, which I'll talk about later, which was a great mixture, I suppose, of what I ended up. So I think I ended up with a great theater technique, but I came across it sort of by osmosis. And, I was an L.A. boy for most of my career, for the first 30 years. I mean, I lived and worked in England and got some movies in Europe and stuff, but I never did theater. And I sort of stayed away from it. L.A. was not, and it is a little bit more now, but there was a couple of downtown theaters at the Music Center and the Mark Taper, and they were sort of cabals controlled by people who did that kind of thing. So I was never that. So I stayed away from it. And then I got into my 40s, and people I knew, like from acting classes, and which I did a lot of different techniques. I remember Lisa Dalton from the Chekhov technique, Michael Chekhov. She put together a production of Mice and Men in the Chekhov method, which is very much about creating atmospheres. And Steve McQueen and Clint Eastwood, and just very interesting. He was Anton Chekhov's nephew, I think, and they asked me to play George in Of Mice and Men, which, Gary Sinise and John Malkovich did it.
Right.
Not only on film, they probably did it for 500 performances at Steppenwolf and Broadway. You know what I mean? And I thought, oh, my God, lines. I mean, George and Of Mice and Men, it starts with, here, have a can of beans, and ends with, I'm shooting you in the back of the head about 2 hours later, And I learned it. And after, there's nothing scarier than the first couple of preview performances, And once you get over that, it was brilliant. And I was able to fall back on, hey, wait a minute. I felt like I'd been in a time tunnel, and I was in a place where I shouldn't have been. And all of a sudden, wait a minute, I'm in the right place, So I ended up doing a fair amount of theater in the last 10 or 15 years in L.A. And so I guess I'm looking back, and I picked it, I sort of learned as I went, but I felt there was very little difference, really. Maybe it's more of stamina, physical stamina. But I've done some really nice theatrical projects. I was in a comedy which ran for a year and a half. Now, when I say run, these are small theaters. These are,
right.
And you're lucky if you have 40 people in the audience at some time. So it's a little bit of a fool's errand. But I could go and do a play in London. I know it. I could do a play outside and come into New York. I know I could. I've got enough confidence now to do it. But in order to do that, most people really have to spend a life in the theater, and then they dabble in film and TV. I was the other way around.
That's usually how it goes. And, in other actors that I've interviewed for my podcast, they start in theater and then they transition to film and TV.
It's hard. It's hard
interesting
to get in. Yeah.
That yours is the opposite.
Well, I would recommend. I mean, people say, "Hey, I'm going to move to Hollywood. What's your advice?" And it's usually take Fountain because it's an easier street to navigate than Santa Monica Boulevard. But people would call up and say, "Listen, I think I'm going to try it out in L.A." Oh yeah, why? Yeah, well, because I'm not getting any work here in New York. And I go, "Well, you'll do fine in Hollywood, man, because nobody works out here." I mean, yeah. It's tough. So you need to find a place where you can work. I mean, if you want, any other sport, okay, you want to be a tennis player, where are you playing? Well, I'm not. I'm going to wait till I'm. No, you're not. You got to get the ball over the net, which is a little more finite. And I think my advice to most people is that, especially young people, find a place to act. It could be Pensacola Little Theater. Not so much that you'll learn from playing parts, but you'll also learn because a lot of these theater people, quite rightly, they've paid their dues elsewhere, and they're running a theater company. They might not be the easiest people to work with, and you need to learn how to pull the stickers out without freaking out, without being too sensitive about it. You need rhino skin to quote a Tom Petty song to be an actor, and I think theater gives you that safer place to work, especially rep or summer stock back in the maybe 70s or so. If you can find a rep theater, or I think Louisville is a good theater town, the Pacific Northwest is a good theater town, Shakespeare festivals, go and dedicate 6 months of your life there. You'll learn a lot. And then, how do you transition? Well, you get an agent and you get a job. I mean, it's not easy. But at least you've acted. At least you have some...
You have a foundation.
Some sense. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, in the topic of theater, why don't we segue into the Hamlet documentary that you were talking about.
Good.
Yeah.
Well,
so yeah, tell me about
it's time for the flagon of ale.
Oh,
do you know about this film? Did you read about it in the book?
Yes, I did.
Well, I was good fortune. A friend of mine I met in the sort of celebrity golf world, named Chris Stevens, was one of the founders of the Keurig Coffee Company. Okay, and when I say one of the founders, he was one of the three guys, and he and his sons would take a steam iron and put on the lids of the little coffee demos, right? And so, they did well. And like throughout time immemorial, from the ancient Greeks to Marlowe and Shakespeare on up to up, a lot of art, and you found it in the world of independent film. Whenever you see there's 6 or 8 executive producers on a 20-minute film, okay, each one of them helped you pay the bills.
Yep.
So patronage is very important in most creative endeavors, not least of which independent film. And Chris said to me, he got to know me and liked me, and he said, look, I've done really well in my life. I'm cashing in. I would like to back you in something. And I said, okay, great. And so I sent him a couple of traditional indie film scripts that friends of mine, and like we did with The Pursuit of Happiness, same sort of thing. And he go, no. And then, again, I did a theater project at the Methodist Church, which was the, what's the Jimmy Stewart Christmas story? It's A Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
It was a staged reading of A Wonderful Life at the Methodist Church, which, Methodists and staged readings, and it was about as intricate as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But at least you had the book in your hand, and it was music, and it was a lot of fun. I played a bunch of different parts, and the audience loved it. And I thought, ooh, this is a very interesting way to perform with the script in your hand. And then there were I was reading the John Barrymore book called Damned in Paradise, and there's a wonderful chapter about Barrymore in the 1920s, how he did a Hamlet in New York, which was very physical, and then took it to London, and people hated it, people loved it, either loved it or hated it, because he was physical. He was sort of mean and gnarly and the Yank, And I thought, ooh, that's interesting. And I swear to God, it's a long story, but this part of it is Schweppes Bitter Lemon, which has always been one of my favorite drinks. I remember sitting in the garden in Santa Monica, armed with this book that I had read most of it, this chapter, the idea of staged reading, and I've always wanted to play Hamlet. Well, because I'm an actor who didn't go to drama school, so, no duh.
Yeah.
You going to play Hamlet? Did you go to drama school? No! And they go, oh, this is going to be fun. And I had this draw of bitter lemon, and I swear the effervescence just illuminated me, and it brought these disparate elements together. Hamlet, staged reading, 3 days, because I'd written what became this book. I'd written about my 3 days on Spielberg movies, which were compartmentalized, powerful stories. River Phoenix, Chris Walken, Leonardo DiCaprio, all these powerful stories. And the three coalesced, and I thought, my God, Hamlet in 3 days as a staged reading. And I called Chris. He goes, what you thinking about? And I told him basically what I just told you, and he goes, that's the one. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, yes, Punch, that's my middle name. He says, the way you just talked about it, you have to do this, and let me help. And of course the bill went a bit up, and he was terrific, but we made it, and it's called 3 Days of Hamlet, and it's out there. I mean, God, it was on Amazon Prime for a while. We got it. I was lucky to get a DVD distributor out of it. We didn't get into Sundance. It was the year Michael Rappaport got his wonderful Beats and Rhymes about the Wu-Tang Clan into Sundance, which is a wonderful film. And you can only have so many actor-directed, produced documentaries. And so they didn't have dear old Alex Hyde-White playing Hamlet. But I was so satisfied with it. We did it with in the theater for 3 days. We had Richard Chamberlain as Polonius and my old family friend Stephanie Powers as Gertrude, my mother. And I wasn't quite... I guess I was about 50 years old, which is just about, you better do Hamlet by the time you're 52, because you got white hair anyway. Olivier used to say that. And Olivier, of course, became the extension of John Barrymore, was known for his physicality, his physical approach. So I'll tell you, I did not spend much of my life. I'd played Romeo when I was a kid for TV, Showtime, 25. I'd done bits and bobs, little pieces of it, scenes maybe. I was not a Shakespeare expert, but Hamlet itself is such a good part. most of those plays are so good. They're like putting puzzles together. If you can just identify the right piece at the right time and just don't try to do too much with it, it takes you on a wonderful journey. And if anybody is still watching at this point, it's 3 Days of Hamlet, and it's available. And if you're at all interested, well, you are, because you're part of Derek's world. It's something I'm very, very proud of. And it was just so satisfying to, it became an opus, sort of like, rather like this book. It's my life framed from pop culture, or framed with an approach to Shakespeare. Because it was like Big Brother meets Roadshow Shakespeare. It was behind the scenes. We had like 7 cameras shooting B-roll, and so there'd be people going, I don't know what the hell he thinks he's doing, but then you cut to, I say, dear boy, where are you going to speak, marry the word to the action, not the action to the word, all of this bit, and you're back and forth. So what happens is real life becomes Shakespeare. Shakespeare doesn't become real life. Shakespeare is real life. Mm-hmm. I got wonderful people. An old friend of mine, Peter Woodward, the son of the great Edward Woodward, who was a wonderful actor, English, known Peter for years. And he was a traditional theater actor who's gone on to great success, particularly as a writer in Hollywood. Wonderful actor. And so he had some wonderful salient things to his experience. The wonderful thing about that film, not unlike the work that you've done here, people joined you not for the $100 a day that I was able to pay them, which was SAG ultra low budget minimum.
Right.
Richard Chamberlain showed up, and we put a pack on him, and they said, Richard's playing Polonius, which is a very long-winded part. I go, and we had this script that we'd cut down a bit. Cara Tyler, a friend of mine, had cut it down from, 3.5 hours to 2.5 or something. And they said, do you want Richard to read the whole speech? I go, hell yeah, we want him. We've got Richard Chamberlain. Yeah, we want him. It's here.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was wonderful. It was a bit like herding cats and kindergarten at the same time, but it was everybody really, really enjoyed it. And if we'd gotten into Sundance, I think we could have entered that world of schools and whatnot. But it's always wishful thinking to think that something can do better than it did, or that it should have, because the joy and the satisfaction is in the doing. If you can get a film financed, shot without anybody, having serious fights, edited and released on a platform that you can see it, what more can you ask for, Mm-hmm. That's just, like you were talking about the Fantastic Four. That's scraggly old bootleg still alive in the YouTube world,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That was they tried really hard for nobody to ever see that film.
So that's actually a perfect segue. So I was telling you before we got on the air that I have never seen that movie until, as of the day we're recording this, yesterday.
And you still wanted me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, you look at the other Fantastic Four films.
They're $100 million films. There's no comparison.
Yeah, but you could say that those Fantastic Four films aren't really that great either.
Well, they're bloated. They're overloaded.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're made by committee, and they're made defensively. They're afraid that they're going to mess it up. Yeah.
So tell me about how did you get involved with this film?
It seemed like a legitimate. I mean, it was a real job. Things come out on breakdowns, all right. And this is before breakdown. Still breakdown services. It's all digital now. You get it. I am right for this part. And my manager agent sends you an audition. You read it, and sometimes they call you. Jordan Peele called. Taylor Sheridan's people called, and it's great to get little jobs. They're a lot better to get them because you don't have to be in Hollywood to be the 4:10 meeting on Olympic and La Brea for me in Santa Monica. Oh my God, I'm gonna have to leave at 12:30. Forget it. So that's a Hollywood transportation aside, but these things come out, and the breakdown that says this is the part of Dick Kesner, a divorce lawyer, and Catch Me If You Can, director Steven Spielberg, is printed the same way. That says, this is the Fantastic Four, the part of Reed Richards, director to be announced, start date tomorrow, or whatever, 2 or 3 weeks. And I remember my manager said, hey, this is pretty good. This might be you, because what's the character? Reed Richards, he's
really smart, but he's
not authoritative.
Yeah, he's not, a little socially awkward.
Yeah, but he's not a bully. He's
right.
He's
Very reserved.
He's collaborative.
Yeah.
And not that I was any one of those things, but my manager said, hey, this is pretty good. And I read the thing, and I go, well, yeah, I don't know how are they going to do the stretching part, because it was part of the breakdown. He says, don't worry about that. And I went in, and I had one of the best auditions. I mean, I think I had 3 really good auditions in my career. One was what got me the contract at Universal. It was a scene from Battlestar Galactica where the director and casting director basically said, you've never done this before? And I go, well, yeah, but no, not really. And he go, do you know about our new talent program? And so I was hired. And then the second one was Ishtar with Elaine May at the Savoy Hotel in London to play a CIA guy in Dustin Hoffman and Warren Beatty's film. And at the time, they were, the top of their game. And a guy my age, I wanted to be Warren Beatty and to be able to make films, and I wanted to be Dustin Hoffman in terms of acting, and so I got that part. But the real impetus and story in my book is because it was at the Savoy Hotel, and I was trying to make the 1 o'clock race at Ascot, which is you take the train to Waterloo and then to Ascot, and it was May, and I was a fan of horse racing, and it was 11 o'clock, and old ditzy Elaine May. Anyway, I went in there and I just flew through the audition. CIA, go to here, here, the glasses, here, take this. And no, I don't think so, huh? Any questions? No, I'm good, goodbye. And they called. I was in Greece doing a movie. They want you for Ishtar. And I was on the set, and they go, did you ever see your video audition? I go, well, no. I mean, did you? And they said, it was, when you left, and we looked it back, Elaine said it was one of the best auditions she's ever seen. And this is Elaine May from Nichols and May, from wonderful sort of scripted improv kind of work. And it was all because I wanted to get to the next stop, which was the Ascot races, which is a wonderful way to talk about the power of storytelling. You're in this moment to sort of illustrate and prepare for what's next, not so much plot, but action. And then the third audition, I suppose, is the one that you're asking me about, was Fantastic Four. And that was different because it was, for independent movies, they kind of give you, is there any more? No, those are all the scenes, not for Reed, like 3 or 4 scenes. But there was one in particular which I focused on, and I'd worked really, really hard on it. And I walked into that room with a good first impression. For one thing, there were a few people in the room. There was, I think, the director, the casting director, and the producer. And I did the scene. I walked out of that room with the job for 2 reasons. 3 reasons. Number one, I was right for the part, and I had delivered a prepared yet alive one and only one-time audition.
Right.
With a sense of discovery, which is great because the scene is, I think maybe that Colossus has touched our insides, making our worst defects, or, that kind of thing, right? There's only one way to do that, but if you write for it, that's the right way. Mm-hmm. So that was number one reason, is that I was on time and I gave a good audition. The number 2 reason was because there weren't too many voices in the room. It was a director and a producer. If 2 out of the 3 in agreement, they're going to make an offer. And then the third reason was, of course, it started like a week from Thursday. And then that's when we learned about the subplot behind the movie. This has to be made. It has to be started by a certain date in order for the owners to retain the rights so that they don't have to renegotiate, so that they can make a bigger film, what's going to happen to our film? Well, we had Roger Corman on our side, and Roger was never one to miss an opportunity to maximize his film work. And he made sure that Ole Sassoon, the director, had the resources and materials to complete the film, not so much finish it and color it and score it, but complete it to a point that if the negotiation to flip it to Fox, which ended up happening, was going to go another way, then all Roger had to say, I think I'll take this film. I think I'll keep this film, and I'll give you your $1 million back or whatever. And it would have been a modest Roger Corman, live on forever as a creaky little Fantastic Four origin story. But in terms of acting part, it was just as legitimate as anything else. And quite often, I suppose people say to me, oh, it's a shame that wasn't released. And I go, yeah, I guess, maybe, but no. It's the story just keeps on getting better, especially when they start making $100 million versions, which are no good,
Well, it's interesting because, I can remember back in, I think it was the early 2000s, reading like Wizard Magazine and other magazines about this movie that was never released. I think it might have been around the time that the first Fox Fantastic Four
When was
came
that,
out.
like 02 or 03?
It was, like mid-2000s. It might have been 05.
Well, interesting, because when did we make that? We made it in 93. I think it was kind of the year now is 94 is when it was ready to go. And it was pulled. I remember, I think we had a press agent friend of mine who was working on the film. He had us booked at the Rose Parade or something, There was, nobody knew that it was a phony film. It was a film, just like anything else. And we were set to go. But prior to that, when Ole, who now lives in New Orleans, and I see him a couple times a year, was putting the film together, he knew, and I knew, that we had a window here. And it was really working in our favor. You got to find a timeline where you can do something. And if everything's very, really, really quick, you really don't have time to get in. This one was all made quickly, and then it just lingered. So I said, hey, wait a minute. And I went to Roger's people and I said, I've got some friends in New York who are writing for the New York Post, and they can put us in the paper. And I've been in touch with some comic book stores. And, if I pay my way to get out there, they'll let us show the little trailer and give away some photos and promote the film. And it was just like the old days. I'm talking about patronage and barnstorming and actor-producer kind of Olivier stuff as you get out and you find your audience. And we went to these comic book stores, and it's in the book. In New York, we had a comic book convention, not unlike Mike's Pensacola here, in Charlotte or something. And people loved to hear the story of Fantastic Four. And this was 93. And it was in these magazines. And I was actually at a fight at Madison Square Garden with my friend who wrote for page 6 of the Post. He got into everything. He sat in the front row at Yankee Stadium once with him. And we're sitting at a fight at Madison Square Garden. I think it might have been a De La Hoya fight. I can't really remember. But next to him, hey, Alex, this is Michelle or something. She worked for Marvel. And I said, and he just, oh yeah, okay. Why don't you come and tour Marvel? And so, like, the next day, I'm midtown, and I go to the Marvel offices, which was almost as big as this room. I mean, it was small. They were living on fumes. They had no real direction. I suppose they weren't doing that great anymore with the comic books, and the only deal they had made was with Bernd Eichinger and Roger Corman to make a movie. So their intellectual property had no value at that time. And boy, has that changed. That was 93. And so they would write about the film. And so it began to get this impetus behind it, which probably made it a lot easier for Bernd Eichinger to say for Fox, because Chris Columbus was the director du jour at the time for Fox after Miss Doubtfire. And I think they said to him, what do you want to do next? He said Fantastic Four. So they bought Fantastic Four from Bernd Eichinger, and it took him years to redevelop. And I think Chris Columbus is still one of the producers on the original, the first one,
I think you're right.
Griffith, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, but he didn't direct it. It's too bad. So, I have no dog in the fight, really, about what have they done to Fantastic Four. Now, look, it's going to be Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby and Robert Downey. Good. Go for it. Yeah. Every time they do that, let's have one that's good.
Yeah.
Every time that happens, it makes our little quirky labor of love that actually has a lot of heart. And, nowadays I think with the video fixes, you can remove the shaky sets. But, hey, come on. What the heck? It's
exactly. It almost became this, it achieved like this legendary status, like a legend, like something that you couldn't see, because back then, unless you had a bootleg tape,
it was at these conventions for $10, I think, but it was like a third generation VHS.
Yeah. It's interesting because you mentioned Marvel back in the 90s being kind of running on fumes, and they had to sell all of their, well, not all, but a good portion of their character rights because they were so desperate for money. Yeah, I'm getting there. But I'm very curious to see what they do with the new Fantastic Four, because I think it's something that no one has gotten quite right yet.
It's hard because, look at the name, Fantastic Four. What film TV shows you can get away with it, but what film can you look back on that has 4 leads? I mean, The Magnificent Seven with Steve McQueen, Yul Brynner, and Charles Bronson, and four guys named Joe.
Rare exception to the rule.
Yeah. It's hard, and I think that was the mistake that my friend Mark Frost inherited when he wrote the first. He got credit for it by the time he got in. I think it was he did the best he could. Is that they focused on the Michael Chiklis character, Ben Grimm, the Thing. Mm-hmm. I remember going to see that film, and Ewan Griffith, the Welsh actor, he's terrific for the part. Very, very good actor. There's no reason why he shouldn't have carried that film. But they didn't give it to him. They gave it to Michael Chiklis, who opens the film creating carnage on a bridge because he's depressed. So right then I said, wait a minute, your hero cannot be responsible for the problem that he has to fix. Internally, yes, that's a hero's journey. I have something in me that needs to manifest. Hamlet, for instance. I'm going to kill my... It manifests itself in this
like a character flaw you have to improve.
Right, which is really what the Fantastic Four is. And I just felt that they were so external with it that if it had been a dream sequence, if it had been in his imagination, he wreaked havoc. Then he says, I realize now that I must talk to Reed, or whatever. But they created this set piece of a wreck on a bridge in order for him to show, and I just, they've sabotaged it, because where are you going to go from there,
It's a good Ben Grimm impression, by the way.
No, thank you. Reed! Yeah. In our movie, it's Reed, because he couldn't see. Yeah.
I did love the line, though, and you alluded to it earlier, about how the Colossus kind of brought out what you consider to be flaws.
That was in the script.
Yeah, I thought that was...
Craig Nevius.
I thought that was good storytelling.
Craig Nevius has become a go-to writer in many genres. He was a young fella. He wrote that script. He must have done some Roger Corman movies. It was a surprisingly linear script. I mean, it really made sense. And yes, well, that's the I don't know what it's Freudian or whatever, but that's the psychoanalysis of Sue Storm. She's really shy, so she disappears because she wants to disappear. Mm-hmm. Johnny Storm, hold on to that fire, Johnny. We're gonna need it. I mean, I think I came up with that line when we were in the movie because he's all spitting. Jay Underwood was really spitting, and then Michael Bailey Smith, a big, tall Eastern Michigan football player who was like 6'4", and the first thing they built to ensure that they could make this film was the stunt suit for Ben Grimm, the Rock Man, which was like 5'10", and so like Michael said, "What? I can't be Ben Grimm." So they hired Carl, the famous stuntman, Carl Ciarfalo, to be in the suit. And to this day, I just was at Michael's wedding a couple months ago. It's up in Arkansas, and he laments the fact that he wasn't able to play the Thing character. Yeah. But it's lovely.
Interesting.
We are flawed people. I'm at that point. I think I was an actor who probably should have been doing better than I was, even though I was doing okay. And that kind of is a thing about Reed. Is why do you stretch yourself too thin? Well, because you're trying to handle too much. Okay, and it's easy to make those psychological associations with these characters. And I don't know how effective they've been in the remakes dealing with that, the psychology of it.
Right. We'll see what they do with the new one.
Well, having Robert Downey. Now, apparently Iron Man, or Tony Stark, is it? He becomes Doctor Doom in some comics. So there's a legitimacy there, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Yes, where I think it's Doctor Doom takes up the Iron Man mantle or
is that
something,
what it is? Okay.
Something like that.
Maybe the other way around. Then. Well, my friend Joseph Culp, who was the son of Robert Culp, the TV and film star of the 70s, played Victor Von Doom in our young college scenes in the beginning, and then Dr. Doom, of course, behind the mask. He has started this rather effective petition that is really catching on now. He's sort of written, I think he had someone, might have had the writer. Anyway, he took it upon himself to write this open letter sort of challenging Disney to, you must release the original Fantastic Four in order to remove the curse of the Fantastic Four. And I heard that go, ooh, dude. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, Disney's going to, they'll get right on that. But I finally signed on to it and contributed a bit to the change.org. So anyway, it's out there. Free the Fantastic Four. All right, pay your $6.
Free the Fantastic Four. Yeah.
So you never know. I think that if they were to get it right, if this Fantastic Four, you can't go wrong with Pedro Pascal.
Right.
I mean, I think we've liked everything he's done up to now, right? Starting with Game of Thrones. If they get it right, and the Fantastic Four becomes this valuable property in the Disney world, then I think they'll have to look at ours and say, you know that buried negative, you know that destroyed negative? Actually, we've been keeping it, in that old salt mine in Colorado where we keep all the movies. It's there. And they release it on Disney Plus, and they put it out on some DVD or whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's finally we'll be like, like the old Lone Ranger says, you're the Lone Ranger. Yeah, I was a Lone Ranger. It's finally going to come back. I don't know. It should, but it'd be good it meant a lot to Joseph to challenge Disney. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to ask you, you had a role in the show Newhart back in the day, and we recently lost Bob Newhart, one of the greatest comic actors of all time. What was it like working with him?
It was probably the biggest break I had in network television. I'd been on quite a roll. I'd done a Roger Corman movie, a time tracker film. I was one of the last 3 for Ron Howard's Willow with Matt Frewer and Val, and of course Val Kilmer played the part. And Roger hired me for a film called Time Trackers, which was this little bootleg Willow. Roger was great at doing little bootleg knockoffs of bigger films. So I got to play the Mad Mardigan character, Edgar of Mansfield. So I had these hair extensions and whatnot. And I remember going into Newhart. I knew somebody who worked in the offices there. Patrick McNee's, I think, daughter-in-law was the receptionist at the producer's office, and so I think she might have said, "Oh, I know Punch. He's really good. You like him." And I went in, and I had my long hair. I'd been doing a fair amount of. I was on a roll, anytime I've always felt as an actor, if you can get 3 jobs in a row, it's like, you're parlaying. You can get a job, then I got another job, and then what? I was out of work for 4 months. If you can get 3 jobs in a row, you got to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm kicking, I'm doing good, because the odds are always against you. And I was on that little roll, and I walked into Newhart, and it just so happens that they were getting near the end of their run. It was the last season, I believe. I didn't know this then, but Newhart was looking for a way to land the show, looking for the character to sort of a way out. And they came up with this Newhart and was it Libby, Julia Duffy was the wonderful, they all wore these great sweaters, and they all had this real joie de vivre about them, real theater acting, but just really spot on. And they go to New York to this, I want to go to the Society Ball. Okay, so Newhart, all right, I'll go with you to the Society Ball. Fine. They go there, and Merv Griffin is there. And I knew Merv because my dad would go to do Merv Griffin shows anytime they needed somebody. They'd have Wilfred Hyde-White on because we lived down the road. They had him half a dozen times. One time he had me on. So Merv's there, and then they hired me. I did this audition, and they called up to hire me to play Scooter Drake, who was a guy with more money than sense. But he had a lot of sense, okay? And usually more money than sense means you're a dumbass. But I don't like that. I've never liked to play tennis anyone or, excuse me, where's the polo field? I mean, Pretty Woman was good because at least he was the romantic foil to Richard Gere, which,
there was some substance there.
Doesn't come around too often, okay? Yeah. So that's a different story. We might have to get that one on part 2 of this after the break. But so Newhart comes along, and I play this nice character, and hello, Libby, Scooter. Oh, Libby. And she's enamored with him, okay? So they go back, and it was fun. It was a fine episode. And about 3 weeks later, my agent calls up and says, hey, Newhart's sending you a script. They want you to do another episode. I said, great, fine. Sending you a script means a teamster is going to drive it to the valley, drop it off in a manila envelope. You pick it up, you open it, and Scooter Drake is on like page 2. And you read it, page was a half-hour show, so like page 40, Scooter Drake is there. I go, whoa, this is a good part. Well, Scooter is coming to Vermont to buy the inn. And Newhart told me during the show, I really thought for a while that I'd sell the inn to Scooter. But then I thought, no, my fans wouldn't like it if I was rich, to which I could only reply, yes, and I suppose they wouldn't like it if I was rich for the moment as well, which is a perfect Scooter Drake line.
Right.
But it was just a wonderful, and it was a part that in all intents and purposes required theater training, required the ability to, just be larger than life, which you're afraid to do in a way in film, although all the people that we've admired, Russell Crowe's and Kevin Costner's and Bradley Cooper, they're larger than life. Clint Eastwood, larger than life, but different technique. Tom Poston, the wonderful character actor who played the handyman, and he came to me after the dress rehearsal. He says, Alex, and it's in my book, he says, and now as the old actor gets to tell the young actor, fill the costume.
Wow.
And it really means go cue to cue.
Right.
Don't try. You know the parts, everybody's waiting. Hit the lines, hit the cue, let the laughs come, which was Newhart's way, okay? He surrounded himself with characters so that all he had to do was, he was reacting. Mm-hmm. Larry, Darryl, and Daryl, right? Mm-hmm. This wonderful Bill Sanderson and his deaf-mute brothers, right? And so Scooter came along, and it was just a magical Friday shoot, starting with a Monday rehearsal. I think we might have done 2 takes of several scenes, but, Newhart liked to be on the tee on Monday morning at Bel Air at 10 o'clock, so he didn't work too late on the weekend. And it led to Pretty Woman. When the casting director for Pretty Woman, Dory Zuckerman, who was working for Diane Crittenden, head of Disney casting, she was under orders from Gary to hire somebody who could be a romantic rival to Richard Gere, but it was at an arena of polo and shipbuilding, and she heard my voice on Newhart it was just right around the time it came. I think the Newhart show was probably December or January of whenever Pretty Woman was, 90, I think.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And they were casting, and they were under the gun to cast it. Again, there was a sense of urgency. She looked up and said, whoa, Alex is funny, and he looks wealthy. And she went back to Disney. What about Alex Hyde-White? And they brought me in to the set. They'd already started filming. And read the scene. Vivian, David Morse, I like your hat. And Gary says, okay, good. He says, look, I got to get back. We're filming the next scene. I'm going to try. Would you dye your hair? I got a lot of dark people in the movie. Would you dye your hair blonde? I go, yeah. I hear you play polo. He said, well, God bless Dory, the casting director. I was a pretty good horseman. And I was a good golfer. So, yeah, sure, good. I'll let you know as soon as possible. I'm going to try, which really meant he's got to go up against Jeffrey Katzenberg, who's going to say, what? Whatever. And so Newhart, in his really kind of befuddled, doesn't miss a trick way, gave me the freedom to soar in this part because he encouraged characters around him, which was enough to satisfy what Disney was looking for. So talk about 3 jobs in a row. I mean, there's no way Pretty Woman happens if I don't go into the Newhart audition without this sense of, hey, I'm making birdies, I'm shooting pars, I'm winning games, whatever it is, So it's really, it was a rare instance where momentum was on my side. So I hope that answers your question, but it probably answers 3 or 4.
Yeah, no, that absolutely. And I can remember, watching Nick at Night growing up, and they would air like the Bob Newhart show, Newhart, Taxi, Happy Days, like all those. So even though those were before my time, I knew about all those classic shows.
Well, Newhart was what? I think he lived to a ripe old age of...
He was 94.
Mid-90s.
Yeah.
He did... This was the last Newhart. I guess he'd done 1 or 2 CBS shows before. The Suzanne Plachette show was the big one. Mm-hmm. But this one ran for 7 years. And I saw Julia Duffy. She did a play with Richard Chamberlain that I went to see soon after we did our Hamlet movie. I saw Julia. She was lovely. Sometimes you have to realize that when you're on a show like Peter Scolari was or Julia Duffy, that this is the highlight of your life, your acting career, especially if you've married your life to your acting career, I mean, you hate to think, well, God, I peaked in 1990, and what are you doing now? I'm selling real estate in Poughkeepsie, whatever. And dear old Peter Scolari, he died too young. But it's a double-edged sword in a way. They contributed so much to the fans. They gave so much of themselves. They live on forever, which is the reality of immortality just comes with any time you're in film and TV. You're there. I mean,
yep.
My dad's been been gone over 30 years now. Yet his film work still is alive, and touch wood, mine will be too. But it doesn't last very long. I mean, very rarely. Kiefer Sutherland might be an exception. Tom Cruise certainly, but Kiefer in terms of television. Very rarely do actors and actresses have a 40-year career. It's usually you're known for one or two shows, but to be known, to have that show as a sort of a launching point for me during a very prolific time in my career was just couldn't. It was just a happy accident. But again, with Fantastic Four, if you're on time and if you're either relatively sober or appear sober, and you say their lines in such a way that you're honoring their lines, you're not making it your interpretation. Yes, they want you to interpret, but no, they don't really. They want you to say their lines and get it right so they can go to the next scene.
Right.
Famous story, it's in the book about John Evnett told me when I was playing on his baseball team in the early days. He said, we're casting a movie, and we saw a very interesting actor, and the movie was Risky Business. And I said, oh, yeah. He says, yeah, he started the audition, and like 30 seconds into it, he said, sorry, can I stop? And I go, you can do whatever you want. Yeah. No, I'm a lot better than this. And he started the audition again, and it was Tom Cruise.
Wow.
And he got the job. Of course he got the job for Risky Business. You know what, Derek? He probably would have got the job anyway.
Probably.
So again, Tom Cruise is obviously now, thank God, we owe the survival of 2022's box office to Mission Impossible. Mm-hmm. So he knows how to make film, and he knows how to control the set, and he's if you're on his team, you're probably good. If you're not going to last long. I mean, he's a force.
When you look at Top Gun Maverick, when it was supposed to come out in the summer of 2020, and then everything shut down. Yeah. But they were so adamant to keep that movie in the theater, and that movie is meant for the theater experience.
Oh, it was extraordinary. I saw some of it. We were in where were we? We were in Scotland just on a little vacation a couple of weeks ago, and it was on one of the BBC channels. We even just watched. It's like one of those movies like Patriot Games. You can watch, or Last of the Mohicans. You can watch any 20 minutes from one commercial to the next.
Yep.
You go, my God, this is a good movie, and then you click. And in our infinite wisdom, the Actors Union would not let Tom Cruise and his people promote the film during the actors' strike. Can you believe that? They wouldn't let them go. It's I tell you, these totalitarian socialist impulses. Cheers.
That could be a whole separate podcast.
Well, I know, but I mean, come on. They made it hard for Tom Cruise to make Maverick a hit movie.
Yeah.
And then Spielberg and Chris Nolan, at the end of the summer, they thanked him for saving AMC movies. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, he's wonderful. But, look, it's a business. On the high level, it's a business for control freaks. It's for people who know how to do it, know how to get it done, and do it in such a way that they keep their crew so that the people want to work with them again. And after a while, Spielberg's great at that. He's not so much, I would think, in his own world. He doesn't have to be a control freak because it's Spielberg. You're gonna do it the way he wants it, whether he knows it or not. But I would think that in order to survive as a young filmmaker, you really need to take ownership and almost not compromise in a way. But you need to do it in such a way that you make friends and you keep people like our cinematographer Kevin. Mm-hmm. The next time Stephen Wise or Derek Diamond calls, say, hey, we got this film, he goes, hey, great, let me clear my schedule, because he wants to work. It's not about the money. If you're in show business to make money, get a real estate license. Not that that's going to help, but I mean,
right.
It's about the satisfaction of creating something from nothing. And no one did it better in television in a sort of anti-hero way than Bob Newhart, And so that's, that's my Newhart experience.
Absolutely.
It's in the book, in the volume, My Life in Film and TV.
So that's actually an excellent segue to wrap up our conversation. You wrote your own autobiography in the volume, My Life in Film and TV. So at what point did you decide, I want to tell my story in a book?
Right before the lockdown, and the lockdown gave me time to do it. I'd collected stories, the River Phoenix story when I was young Sean Connery, with the wonderful, mercurial, otherworldly presence that River Phoenix was. He was just a cipher. John Travolta had it, I think, as a young actor. You could watch him do a scene and like the history of the world could be illuminated inside it. It was just, he had this, he was just channeled into something effortlessly and singularly magical, I felt. And in my short time, I loved working with River. Working with him in the sense that, he was running into the shot in Indiana Jones, and I'm saying, Junior, which ended up really being Sean Connery, but it was me because they couldn't have Sean Connery, and my voice is a bit, but it started my professional relationship with Spielberg, which he's been wonderful to me a few times. Derek, in my own sort of clumsy way, I just felt that I had, in a sort of Forrest Gump-like manner, been a part of such wonderful pop culture through the eyes of film and television experiences that I needed to put them down to both sort of honor and validate them and also to release them, It's like a good parent is someone who never stops loving their children, but now sort of has to do so at a distance. You sort of have to let them learn how to pay the rent or,
right.
Or change a flat tire or whatever needs to be done. And I'd never been a writer. I was a great collaborator, I felt, with scripts or with parts. I was wonderful, like a producer, a creative producer. But I just didn't really have the discipline or the imagination to create plot. I've never really been good on plot. I've been good on scenes and opening and moments. And I suppose that was reinforced as a film and TV actor. It's at the moments between action and cut. So when I started to write these stories, it started with right around the time I was telling you about the staged reading, Methodist Church, and the 3 stories I had written about my 3 days on Spielberg films. That's why I put 3 Days of Hamlet. It was Indiana Jones, and it was Catch Me If You Can, and then it was Tintin. Was 3 different. I think they were literally one day on the set. They might have been 3-day jobs. So I've had a career with it. At that time, it was a 40-year career. And I was talking about 3 days in that career, okay? What a wonderful creative metaphor that mathematics is. You tell them you're celebrating 3 days out of 40 years. Hey, pal, that's not too bad. They're with Spielberg. And then, of course, I could throw in Elaine May and Warren Beatty, and I could throw in, because I had to finish it till Nope came in. Then I could throw in Battlestar Galactica and these wonderful other projects that I've been a part of. And I tried to take myself out of it. Of course, it's my life in film and TV, so how can it not be about me? Of course it is. But it's about me being in these situations. Like the old Star Wars films would have 5 different atmospheres, okay?
Right.
Be ice, be desert, be no oxygen or whatever. I've lived through all of these, the theater. And I just kind of felt that I needed to do it for me, and of course, by extension, maybe my sons. One day they'll get around to reading it. I think one of them's read a fair amount of it. But I just know, like someone like yourself, if I was a fan, even though I'm not old enough to have lived through it firsthand, if I was a fan of shows like Happy Days and All in the Family and the Hill Street Blues, which I was in, to the Mentalist, to Big Bang Theory, The Evolution, a good show is a good show. I mean, nothing changes there. That I would be interested in reading this guy's book because I like that world.
Right.
And then I just started writing it, and it was different. It was not like, to me, writing screenplays has just been like pulling teeth. And with IMDb now, you can go to IMDb, see my 125 credit. Oh, is that when I did Profiler or whatever, And I would use that as a chronology. But once I was writing about that time in my life, on set or whatever, or in between jobs or driving a cab, everything that I had done before, during, and after would then be part of that. So it was a great way to, I suppose, write my thesis. This is me. And now I don't have to, I've lived, win, lose, or draw, plus or minus, benefit or deficit. I've lived through all these experiences and far more, but I'm not beholden to them anymore. I've put them down, and there's a great release to that. It allows me to really embrace the future, and fortunately, I'm still competitive out there. Jordan Peele hired me. Taylor Sheridan hired me. I'm waiting to hear about it. The Todd Haynes movie I'm supposed to be a part of. They need to reschedule it. But and I'm living in Pensacola, doing one of the best pieces of filmic work that I've ever been a part of. And it's thanks to you guys here in Pensacola. So after you read the book, you'll notice that The Walker is not part of it. So you're going to have to see The Walker.
Yeah, absolutely. And that'll be coming out later this year. I'm sure we'll do a premiere here in the Pensacola area, and then it'll be hitting its festival circuit. But on that note, thank you so much for taking the time to have this chat with me. As I mentioned in the beginning, when I knew I was going to relaunch the show, there was no one else that I wanted to have for my first guest. So I very much appreciate it.
All right. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, folks.